I'm excited to hear because we're here in the place that King preached, correct?
Yeah, man. I pledged to make us up 5 just like my daddy did. It was so many things, play college football like my father did. But I didn't want to go into ministry. My dream was I'm going to be the youngest principal in America. I'm going to be one day Secretary of Education or something like that. You fresh out. You think you're grown, but you're still kind of young and growing. All I had was my U-Haul. I drove up from D.C. I'm going to apply for 2 schools. I said, if you don't want me to do this, you ain't going to let me in. That was my way of getting out of it. I had already gotten a few tickets. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to park in the Shaws. When I'm thinking I'm running back to my hat, I don't realize I'm running back to the calling that God had on my life.
Hey, everybody. This is Reverend Kenneth Young here with Sound The Trumpet. This is an interview that we're going to have with none other than Reverend Willie Bodrick, the pastor of 12th Baptist Church in Roxbury, Massachusetts. We're excited. We bring this to you because it is funded by the Lilly Endowment and administrated by Massachusetts Council of Churches. I serve as program director of the Black Ecumenical Council, and just excited to have an interview with my friend, my colleague, my Baptist brother, Reverend Willie Bodrick. Hey, I'm so glad you're here.
How you doing, Reverend Kenny? I'm so glad to be here with you, and so excited for this conversation, and excited for the great work that you are doing, and excited for the ways in which you're bringing the Black church together across the Commonwealth. So this is going to be exciting.
Yes. So I just want to start out with something easy. Yeah. We'll get into the nitty gritty a little bit after this. Just tell us a little bit like where you from and how did you grow up. We want to know a little bit about not Reverend Willie, but just Willie Bodrick.
Yeah. So it's Willie Bodrick II from Southwest Atlanta, Georgia, born and raised.
Is that the SWATs?
That's the SWATs.
Okay.
Yes.
Sure.
It's only one. That's how I always tell people. Only one. If I went further, Zone 4, Ben Hill.
Okay. You from Atlanta for real?
I'm from Atlanta for real. Proud APS kid. Continental Colony Elementary School, Ralph Johnson Bunch Middle School.
Okay.
Benjamin Elijah Mays High School, 3450 Benjamin Elijah Mays Drive. So I'm very proud of the neighborhood in which I come from the family in which I come from. I am the eldest son of the Reverend Willie Bodrick and Anna Bodrick, who are amazing parents. My father was a pastor. He pastored over 35 years. He pastored the Fairfield Baptist Church for about 10 years in Atlanta, Georgia, and he pastored Shady Grove Baptist Church for about 26 years in Watkinsville, Georgia, right outside of Athens, Georgia. And so I grew up in the National Baptist Convention. I grew up in the Black church. I believe I'm a proud product of the Black church. I have 2 younger brothers, Winston and Weldon Bodrick, and it's just been a blessing to be able to grow from that place to where God has taken me. Growing up as a kid, I was an athlete. I was a singer. I was a thinker. All those great things that I played saxophone growing up. I was blessed to play baseball and football most of my life. Those are the sports that I really poured into, and was blessed that those sports, and particularly football, got me a great scholarship and an opportunity to play collegiate football at Division I level at Georgetown University. And so, but what I think a lot about who I am a reflection of my family, a reflection of my community. I am the product of people who poured into me. But most importantly, I know that what God has put in me, He's allowed me to be in the environments to be nurtured to do what He's called me to do. And so I'm thankful for that.
Wow. That's awesome, man. That's a lot.
I
just diverse. All we see is what we see on Sunday.
Definitely.
But I'm glad to be able to hear how diverse. Yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot of layers to you.
Yeah, man. Yeah. One thing I'm very blessed for and thankful for is that my parents didn't allow me to be put in a box. I was a PK, but they allowed me to be a child, to be a kid, to grow and to explore the varying interests that I had. And in many ways, God, was so good to me to give me the opportunities to develop many skills and talents and gifts that I use for the gospel even to this day. And so I'm very grateful for that. And I even to this day, I don't let anybody put me in a box.
Awesome.
I'm Willie Bodrick II.
I hear you. I'm not just Reverend. I'm Willie Bodrick II.
Willie Bodrick II, yeah.
I hear you, man. That's awesome. So just some follow-up questions, right? You talked about being a PK.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've been able to pick up on some things from your father.
Definitely.
Now that you're here, you're the pastor of this historic church. Just kind of, you went to Georgetown, you ended up in Boston. How did you get to Boston.
Yeah,
and
man.
here.
Oh, man. God works in mysterious ways. As a PK, you're being inundated with people's expectations on your life. From the time I was a child, everybody, you're going to be a preacher like your daddy. You're going to be a preacher like your daddy. And it's interesting to be able to parse the fact that I knew that God had some calling on my life, but parsing out the expectations that felt laborious as a child, trying to just be you, figure out who you are beyond what people are telling you you're going to become. And so, I was thankful that my parents allowed for me to grow and develop. I wasn't immediately thinking I was going to be a pastor. You know what I mean? I was in church every Sunday, in BYF, usher board, youth choir, in all these different programming, Sunday school, Bible study, all the things that were necessary for a young person growing up in the Black church. But what I will say is that the opportunities that God presented me, I didn't predict were going to land me back into the calling that he had for me. Wow. And so, even when I got to college, one of the things I made God a promise. I said, I could feel that he wanted something more of me. I said, well, I'm going to just do just enough.
I hear you.
I said, I'm going to be in the gospel choir. And I ended up being a part of the Protestant Student Forum at Georgetown. I ended up, being a part of this group that incubated, this thing we call GU Brothers for Christ, which, really grew into a massive young men's group Christian fellowship at Georgetown University. And yet still I was like, I'm a football player. I pledged on Make Us Up 5 just like my daddy did. It was so many things, play college football like my father did. But I didn't want to go into ministry. I thought I'd do education like my mother. And after college, even during college, I was a student teacher at Southeast DC. Worked at Ballou, worked at some Catholic, a couple schools as a student educator. Thought that after I was done, I was going to go back into education. And I think my dream was I'm going to be the youngest principal in America. I'm going to be one day Secretary of Education or something like that. And it was a valiant and beautiful dream. And so after I graduated, I was working on campus for some time, and then I ended up working at the Seed Public Charter School in Southeast DC. And I was a resident advisor at this quasi boarding school, which was a public boarding school in Southeast DC, in a neighborhood that reminded me a lot of Southwest Atlanta or of Harlem or any other neighborhood where a concentration of Black folks are living, right? And I also was a reading specialist advisor. So I would help, kids with reading comprehension and things of that nature. And, I enjoyed that time there. I learned a lot. I had a crazy shift. I used to work from 3 to midnight. That was my shift. And each and every day. And, it's interesting, being able to learn and grow with these young people. You fresh out, you think you're grown, but you're still kind of young and growing. And I was there for some time, but I felt the Lord say to me, this isn't it.
Wow.
And what I thought was the destination I was going. And it was interesting because I was about to get promoted. I was doing these other things. And I remember the head of school calling me in and saying, hey, there's more for you. And he told me these words, said, don't get stuck here. Wow. Little did he know, the Lord was already wrestling with me in that season. And so I knew there was more, and I was wrestling with this calling. And, a few incidents, that would take more time to discuss and unpack. But God brought me to this conclusion that he said, look, you're running, but I'm calling you to this. And so, I always tell people, I sort of made a negotiation with God. I said, look, all right, you want me to do this. I'm going to trust you. But I said, I'm going to apply to 2 schools. I said, if you don't want me to do this, you ain't gonna let me in. That was my way of getting out of it. I said, look, you know what? And I applied to 2 schools. I applied to Harvard Divinity School, and I applied to Yale Divinity School. A week before my birthday, January, I get an email saying you had gotten admitted into Harvard Divinity School.
Wow.
And, the excitement, the joy, but also the weight. I was like, well, God, I guess you do want me to do this. And that was kind of how I got to it. And, it was a city I'd never been to, a place I'd never known. And it made me really think about Abraham and the calling that God places upon his life, as we're walking out of chapter 11 into chapter 12 of Genesis. I want you to leave your comfort. I want you to untether from all that you know. I want you to walk out on faith and trust me. And so I came to Harvard. I was blessed to meet Peter Gomes before he transitioned, because I thought, I came up for accepting students day. I went to community tea a little early, knocked on the door. I didn't know where I was going, and I heard this very small man, but with a big presence, a giant of a presence, say hello. Wow. Who are you? And I said, I'm Willie Bodrick II. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm here for the tea. He says, you're early, and he walked me around that place. Wow. And really, just took time with me. And little did I know, that he would eventually transition from labor to reward. Wow. Before I even got on that campus. And so I came here, and I think it was meant for me to be at Harvard Divinity School at the time in which I was there, because God always places you with the right people that you need to help prepare you for the calling that He has for your life. And a part of that was I was blessed to come here. I came on up. I ain't know nobody. I had a chapter brother that knew one person who gave me a crust in a corner to sleep in, grab a meal for one night, because my apartment was not even ready. All I had was my U-Haul. I drove up from D.C. I was living in Alexandria, Virginia. I was going to Alpha Street Baptist Church at the time. I'm out here by myself, and God just opened doors, man. God made a way. Got to Harvard, and it was a blessing because, my preaching professor was the Reverend Dr. Charles Gilchrist Adams, and it was in Reverend Adams' class where I really do believe that whatever raw gift I had, he was helping to shape and mold. And he would always say, Bodrick, you got to hone your hermeneutic eye. Keep honing your hermeneutic eye. That's what he would tell me all the time. He said, you got something good there. Keep honing your hermeneutic eye. And so, in everything, it was giving me this framework, this perspective, to continue to see that God is at work in everything around me and everything that we're doing. And I'm so grateful for that class, but for that class, I'm not standing and sitting where I am today. Wow. In that class was also the Reverend Dr. Arthur T. Gerald Jr., unbeknownst to me. I used to see this brother, bald head. He used to wear all black, all gold chain, the gold accessories and the jewelry. He had the cowboy boots on. He'd be sitting in the back, and he was quiet. I didn't know he was there auditing a preaching class with Reverend Adams. And throughout the whole semester, we said no words to each other. We may have did the black man nod, you know what I'm saying? You're going to acknowledge it,
right.
Another brother presence.
Especially the elders.
Yeah, old black man. I was more intimidated, to be honest with you, all black. Right. I'm like, who is this brother? And the last day of class, I preach. And, like most homiletics class, you do your sermon as your kind of final exam. I preached the last day of class, and I thought I had a good little word, you know what I mean? I get there, and I'm running late because parking in Cambridge is just as bad as parking in Boston. Yeah. And I had already gotten a few tickets. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to park in the Shaw's. There was a Shaw's grocery store right there on the back side of Cambridge and Somerville, where Harvard Divinity School sits. And so I parked there. I was like, if I can run to class, preach my sermon, I can run back before the tow truck come, and I can hopefully find a spot on the street by the time I get back. So I had a little elaborate plan, ready to go, ready to rock and roll. And I remember preaching. Came in sweating because I was running late. And then I run to go move my car after I preached. I think I did it well. And Reverend Adams gave me great comments. Ran back to the car because the class was over. And I realized I left my favorite hat. And if you know me, I'm a hat guy, man. I every year I'm buying me a new hat, got a new cap. I like hats. And so I was like, God. So I ran back. Little did I know I was running back to my destiny. Wow. Because if you hear Reverend Gerald tell the story, he was walking away and something told him to turn back around to invite me to come to his church. So me running back to my hat, when I'm thinking I'm running back to my hat, I don't realize I'm running back to the calling that God had on my life.
Jeez.
And so we have a collision at the classroom. And he says, hey, something told me to come back and invite you to come preach at 12th Baptist Church. He was like, I pastor a small church in the city. You know, he sold it a little lower than what it was. And I want you to come preach for our youth Sunday. This is in 2012. I got to Boston in 2011. Got to Roxbury, you know, and so it was the second semester, 2012. And he said, I want you to come preach a youth service. I said, cool. You know, you're a grad student. You know, any little thing help. Any opportunity to preach,
right?
Whether you pay me or not, I'm coming. You know what I mean? And you know, I shout out all the pastors in the Boston and Greater Massachusetts area who just opened up their pulpits to me, even when I thought I was good and I wasn't that good, right? Or if I thought I was good and I was getting better, right? You know, I just thank God for those opportunities because you don't get better without the practice.
That's it.
And so I try to employ that in my ministry as well to make sure that folks get healthy opportunities, or when I know of opportunities that folks, I encourage people, hey man, I know this person, I know that person, because it blessed me in my development. But he invited me in 2012, and what was one invitation for a youth Sunday went to me becoming an intern, went from me becoming youth pastor, youth and young adult minister, then eventually become an assistant pastor, associate pastor. And from 2012 to the time in which they voted on me in 2020, when Pastor Gerald had said that he was no longer, he was putting in his submission, his retirement, and I was voted in, I've been at 12th Baptist Church.
Wow.
And I believe it was because God had a calling on my life, but I think God is funny in that way. It was because I left my hat.
Wow. God indeed has a plan.
He has
right?
a plan.
That's at Jeremiah 29:11,
Man,
right?
for I know of the plans I have for you, says the Lord.
Yes.
Plans to prosper you, not to harm you, give you hope, and to give you a future. Yes. That verse came up for me the other day, man. Yeah. And God has a plan. You got to trust him.
I'm excited to hear, because we're here in the place that King preached, correct?
Yeah, man. Another Southwest Atlanta kid.
See,
shout out.
Something about Georgia.
Another PK,
preachers, right? So that's a different. I mean, how are you handling that? I don't want to say this is a church that's always on the news, but it is kind of like Boston, Roxbury, King Church, right? Yeah. And it's not just King Church for those who are listening, right? Yeah. We know that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King preached here. Yep. But for those who don't know, that may be streaming in or watching this video, Reverend Dr. Michael Haynes.
Michael E. Haynes
was a guy. He was a dude too.
We've had two 40-year guys in our history.
Wow.
He's one of them. Reverend Hester, who actually mentored Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King while he was here. His name was Michael before, just that's why I always mess with him. And if you ever hear Reverend Dr. Michael Haynes talk about it, they used to call each other Mike. That they shared that. But Reverend Dr. Hester and his wife Beulah Hester, they served here from 1924 to 1964. And Reverend Hester, former president of the United Baptist Convention, and was one who wrote our second history book at 12th Baptist Church. Was one who really believed deeply in Christian education, and Daddy King and his wife entrusted Reverend Hester to look after their son while he was here. That's that beautiful National Baptist Convention connection. Look after his son, because he's out of Oxford, North Carolina. They're North Carolinians who ended up here in Boston. And so, we were blessed to have that legacy. And Dr. King, while he was at BU, was working here, preaching here. We got pictures of him even in his time here at 12th Baptist Church serving. And he also preached other places across the city, like most seminarians do. But he was his home base was here. Actually, a matter of fact, the first time his wife ever hears him preach in her life was right here in 12th Baptist Church.
And this is Dr. Coretta Scott.
This is the Dr. Coretta Scott King. Yeah. She was Coretta Scott, the activist, the vocalist, the pianist at the time. And so, the beauty of this church is that it has an amazing history. Reverend Dr. Michael E. Haynes, he is a legend in this city and in the Commonwealth. I mean, he served as both senior pastor of this church from 64 to 2004, but he also was a state representative right here in this area. And so, he's one who, was known as a major mentor for many of the legends of this community. Even when his funeral was here, it brought out folks all across the country to Twelfth Baptist Church, dignitaries. I mean, Louis Farrakhan was here. He said Reverend Haynes was his camp counselor and popped him in the mouth. He said, the only man that ever hit me in the mouth was Michael Lee Haynes. And so, when you're talking about this legacy and history, I just feel honored to carry it. I don't even feel it as a weight. I think about Leonard Grimes, who was one of those, leaders on the Underground Railroad, and his wife, Olivia Grimes, and the work that they were able to do to help liberate folks. I mean, we were known as the Fugitive Slave Church because of Leonard Grimes. You don't have the 54th Regiment. You don't have the movie Glory, Wow. Denzel with the one tear without the advocacy of Leonard Grimes, right? George Washington Williams, who writes the first volumes of the history of Black history of the Negro people in America, was the second pastor of 12th Baptist Church, right? And our history goes all the way back to Thomas Paul. I mean, we're celebrating 220 years from the first African Baptist Church, 185 years as 12th Baptist Church. Our whole theme is that we're built to last. And so I see it as an honor that God, I know that God called me to be at this church in this season, at this place for this time, and to carry the baton for the next generation, so that when we hand it off, they'll have even more to tell about the goodness and the greatness of God.
Awesome, man. So I said all that to kind of segue into this question about your preaching. Right?
Yeah, man.
For those who haven't listened to Pastor Bodrick preach, you need to go and listen to one of his sermons. It's very social justice centered.
Oh, yeah, man.
I think that's a good way to describe it.
That's one way.
Yeah. Can you tell us, how did you get there?
Man, first the gospel, man.
Okay.
I'm very Matthew 25. When I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was thirsty, right? Did you give me something to drink? When I was sick, did you come visit me? When I was a stranger, did you take me in? When I was incarcerated, did you come visit me? For me, I feel like that is what people would call social justice. I call the gospel. That's not a platform. That's the mandate that God has called us to. And so I build my theological underpinnings from that very foundation, right? How can you love a God whom you've never seen but hate your brother or sister that you see every day? Those underpinnings that theologically pretty much set my beliefs up. Is what drives me to preach and have a homiletical approach towards the preaching moment that engages these issues that are real in the lives of our congregation, our community, our city, our country, and even the world. And I think the Bible, but God has something to say about our material, real lived experience. We don't just have to pray for the by and by. We can talk about what God is doing in the right now.
Yes, come on,
and
come on.
I believe that we can do something about that. I believe in you're talking about James Cone, the God of God is a God of the oppressed, right? And Jesus tells us very clearly, man, I came to set the captives free, man. When I became pastor of this church, man, I was so blessed by the opportunity to set another vision, another mission for us, and it was love, light, life, and liberation. If you want to hear anything about 12th Baptist Church under the Bodrick era, it's love, light, life, and liberation. Those are the tenets, man, right? Jesus says, I came to set the captives free, right? To mend the brokenhearted. Man, my whole ministry is built off of the fact that from a broken world, God can make things whole again. And that wholeness comes in many different forms. It's what I learned in my Jesuit school, they call cura personalis, healing, curing the whole person. Wow. And so, I think in the Black church, man, we are the people who believed, let my people go, right? I'm pastoring a church where we were a stop on the Underground Railroad. We were known as the Fugitive Slave Church. We bought people's freedom from enslavement, man. We spoke up when people told us to shut up, and we kept on preaching, kept on singing, kept on shouting. And so I believe, man, the gospel cries out over my head, there's freedom in there. I think our ancestors had something to say. I think Jesus had something to say. I think the Yahweh has always had something to say about the oppressed people and people who have been oppressed, and how we promise people that God is with them in that moment, and how we show people what prayer looks like in action. Sometimes that looks like policy. Sometimes that means preaching truth to power. Sometimes it means exegeting the text to unpack bad theology. Whatever it looks like, that's what we do.
Amen. Well, this is my last question, and I appreciate you sharing, man. I've learned a lot.
Man.
We've had conversations with.
Definitely, man.
I've learned a lot from you in this conversation and interview that we're having right now. Sound the Trumpet is a preaching conference that we put on every year, and for Black heralders of the gospel. Sound the Trumpet could mean a lot of things, right? The way we articulate things when we're preaching, our rhythm or rhyme, pace, pause, punch that we may have, hooping, hollering. But I just want to know from you, what does that mean as a preacher and pastor of 12th Baptist Church? What does it mean to sound the trumpet?
For me, to sound the trumpet is to speak truth to power. Sounding the trumpet means being a voice for the voiceless, but not only being a voice for them, helping the voiceless elevate their voices to be heard. Sounding the trumpet also means appreciating the craft of the art that's brought us through. It has been our way to articulate how God is still speaking to us right now, right? He didn't stop speaking in Egypt, right? And he's not stopping to speak right now. And so it means that we as preachers of the gospel have to make sure that we're sounding the alarm when there is harm on its way, but we're also celebrating the joy of Jesus Christ. And I think that comes through many ways. It brings a smile on my face when we're working collaboratively together, and we're pulling together press conferences to say, look, right now in this moment in this country, we're dealing with an administration that does not have a gospel-centered eye towards his people. And so, we're going to make sure we stand in the gap as a church. That is also sounding the trumpet, not just in the pulpit every Sunday, but in the everyday work that we do to serve God's people. And so I'm thankful for the leadership that you're bringing to us, Reverend Young, to make sure that we are bringing together many voices into this ecumenical way to engage, to address, to celebrate, to lift, to learn, to organize, to collaborate. And I think in the words of that great writer, James Weldon Johnson, we got to continue to lift every voice and sing.
Amen. Well, we are so grateful. Thank you, Reverend Willie Bodrick II.
Thank you, my brother.
Great pastor of the 12th Baptist Church, historic 12th Baptist Church. We thank you all for streaming in, and we're so glad that you're tuning in. And there's more to come to these interviews that we're doing. We're going to learn how to sound the trumpet. God bless you, as always, our prayer.
God bless you.